This is Center Stage, putting lawyers in the spotlight by highlighting attorneys and other industry experts to help take your law firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week talking about another thing that I know a lot about personally. We had an episode about publishing a book, and I have a lot of experience doing that. But now this week we are talking about podcasting for lawyers, and obviously as the host of this show, as the host of Law Firm Marketing Minute, I think I know a little bit of something about podcasting as well. But I've also brought in the expert, Mr. Robert Ingalls from LawPods to talk with me as well. Robert, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I am very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. So, we talked last week about how publishing a book is a great marketing and a business development tool. Podcasting has just exploded over the last couple of years. And I think that it too is another great marketing tool, another great business development tool for your law firm. And so we're going to cover all of the whys and the how-tos today. And so before we jump into it, Robert, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Robert Ingalls, and I am, I'll call myself an expert at podcasting and all things podcasting, but I'm also a former attorney. So I kind of walk the line in that area. I certainly wouldn't call myself an expert there, A, because I am not, and B, because the North Carolina bar has not said that I am. So, but I got into podcasting casually in 2015 while I was still practicing, and immediately fell in love. I listened to my very first one in 15. Within 30 days, I owned like $1,000 worth of gear, this microphone included. So thankfully it worked out. And I just got more enamored with it. I started a podcast out of the law firm I was in. And gradually over the course of a few years, I'll save you the long story, just really fell in love with it and found a way to turn it into a business venture. And it really started with just some lawyers in town that I knew saying, "Hey, I see you doing that. Could you help me?" Yes, I could. And then that developed into a business. And, we've been legitimately practicing in producing podcasts for lawyers since 2017.
Yeah. Awesome. And we'll talk a little bit about your business and what you do a little bit later on, but let's jump into it. Why should a lawyer and a law firm have a podcast?
So I think the number one answer there that I'm finding that comes up over and over and over is potential clients want it. Every time we work with someone, we ask them to be forthright with us with their data. We want to know, when you get this podcast, how is it doing? What are your pages looking like? And we consistently find that when they start putting that podcast on their website, behind the About the Attorneys pages, these are the number one visited pages when people land on the website. So they are going to the website and they are reading a little bit about the lawyer, and then they're immediately engaging with the podcast content after that. And so that is really the number one reason I tell people, is because when you put it there, that's what people want. That's what they engage with. That keeps them there longer. And then on top of that, there's, I'll kind of rattle them off for you and we can dive into them if you want, but it's fresh content for your website. That matters. You want to keep it fresh. Almost every lawyer I know is already spending money on SEO. And so what good content on your website is going to do is it's really going to help you capitalize on the existing SEO spend. Yeah. You're already driving people there and keeping them there. The longer they stay there, the more likely it is that they're going to end up giving you money, or at a very minimum, they're going to end up in your office talking to you. And so you're going to capitalize on that SEO spend. And then it really is a gold mine of content for your website, for your social channels, newsletters, for, client FAQs. You can turn your podcast into so many different assets that just writing a blog post, you can't necessarily do. Not that you shouldn't be doing that as well. And another that I really love is you're developing a relationship using your voice with the client before they set the appointment. So when they hear your voice, they already know it. They already get your sense of humor a little bit. Yeah. Maybe one of the reasons that they called you. So that's kind of the short list of reasons why I think podcasting is so powerful, and we went all in on it.
Yeah, I agree. And I've kind of said this about podcasting before, for a while, we kind of just focused on blogging and video as being a couple of main marketing tools. But a lot of attorneys out there, they're a little camera shy. Maybe there's a little bit, of discomfort around standing in front of a camera. maybe even just getting out your phone and filming a video, not knowing how to do the editing, not wanting to pay a video company a ton of money to do all of that. A podcast is a great alternative to that for a lot of those benefits that you mentioned. People can get familiar, at least with your voice. Sure, you lose like seeing the mannerisms and putting a face to the name, at least an animated face to the name. But to your point, like you still get that voice, you still build that camaraderie and that familiarity there that you maybe don't get with just the blog post or whatever. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the video part. The video's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Some people are super good at it. They bust out their phone and they always look amazing and they get it on the first take. That isn't me. And you watch it back and you're like, oh, I stuttered there. Oh, I did this. And then when editing video, it's harder to edit video, but when I can make a seamless cut. I got one client and they wouldn't even care if I said their name because they love me, but they say, about 100 times in a 30-minute episode. We're able to cut out about 85 of those without the listener having any idea. And so we're really able to make them concise. Whereas on a video, that's just not something that they do because they're not comfortable, because they're not comfortable with the way they speak. They don't want to have to worry about how they look and their body. Like, the moment the video camera turns on, you realize how big your hands are and you don't know what to do with them. Yeah. So it's one of those things that makes it a lot easier for people to create content.
Yeah. So when we're talking about podcasts that lawyers can create for themselves, we got, just stream of consciousness as a format. We can do interviews as a format. Maybe a couple of partners sit down and talk about, a concept. So what, in your opinion, what kind of formats work well for lawyers, and what are some of the topics that a lawyer can cover on their podcast?
Sure. So I think for most lawyers, especially small to medium-sized lawyers, I think the answer the questions the clients have format is the best. Is you already know what your clients want to know. If you're a family law attorney, you know exactly what the top 50 questions they ask when they sit down. Can I take half the money in the bank account? What happens with the house? What do we do with Thanksgiving? Those kind of things you already know. I mean, because they ask you, but you also know what they're searching when they land on your site, what your keywords are, what your phrases are. So double down on those. You're already doing a good job of being found there, and you're being found because that's what the clients want to know. So that's a very good place to start, is kind of that Q&A. You know what they want to know, create an episode about it. That way you have an individual post about it. That's going to be very good for them being able to find it and then get an answer to their specific question. And then that's going to, those are going to perform well already because that's what people are there for. And past that, I think the monologue format has a lot of power, where you just sit down with the microphone and you talk to the client. It's very powerful because they feel like they asked you a question and then you went into it and you already know all of the follow-up questions. So you're able to answer those almost like they asked it in their mind and you told them. However, I'll tell you that is difficult for some attorneys. And if it's difficult for you, don't fret. Get another person in the room and just talk to them. That's easy for almost all of us. You get one person on the microphone, they feed you the question, and then you talk. They can interject and have a little bit of a conversation there, but you're still getting the information out to the person. And you can do it without the stress of feeling like you have to get every single word right that you're saying, or then you're like tripping over and starting over. Like those monologues can turn into an editing nightmare sometimes because you get really worried. But when you're talking to another person, you intuitively understand, just roll with it. And then they can help you out. And so the conversation can flow a lot better. So if you're one of those people, I recommend just grabbing another person in your office, sit with them and talk. But the answering the pain point questions is a big one. But then also think about what is relevant to them, what's happening in the world that might be relevant to them that you might want to speak to. Yeah. If you do mergers and acquisitions, there's legislative changes. There was a lot of that kind of stuff around COVID, like what's going on, updates to existing clients. That's a really good way to update your existing clients, is make episodes about it and just shoot it out. Hey, I know this is something you're worried about. Like here's some information you might want to know about it. Call me if you have any questions. And you may have just updated them and saved yourself, 15 phone calls.
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, just to your point, I mean, that's something that we ended up doing when a lot of the COVID stuff came out with the PPP loans. We have the Law Firm Marketing Minute, which is kind of the flagship show that we do, where I'm just sitting there. I talk at the microphone for about 10 minutes every time. It's just that straight monologue, and it works. And it's weekly episodes, but then we'll throw the extra episode in when there's something big or a big update like that we feel like we can help people out with. And seen a lot of success there. People are enjoying these one-on-one interview sorts of things. And so, yeah, there's a ton of options out there for attorneys to do that. Another question that I thought of while you were talking, not just the format, but also what's your recommendation on like the episode length and how often you publish episodes?
Sure. So yeah, length comes up a lot. And there was, I had a professor in college. I feel like we all had one that said something like this to it, but he said, how long should your paper be was the question. He's like a Scottish man's kilt, long enough to cover the subject, short enough to be interesting. But it really, it applies here as well. However, I think that there are caps on attention span for dense information. And I think if you're providing someone relatively dense information, and it should be targeted, you should, for the most part, be answering one question, and then, the things around it, but specifically you're answering one question per episode. And 20 to 30 minutes, I think, is about what all you're going to get from them, like attention wise, because it can tend to be dense information, whether we think it's super exciting. I mean, I say we, because I am an attorney while not practicing, but there's still a lot of it I find exciting. The client might not be exciting. They really want one thing. They want you to scratch their itch. They showed up with a question, with a problem, and they just want to get an answer that they're satisfied with. And at the end of the day, your goal is to provide them enough information that they know what you're talking about, because they're not going to do this themselves. And if they are, you don't want them calling you anyway, if they're that kind of person, and which is fine. And you want to provide enough information that they trust that you know what you're talking about. They get a good vibe for you. You talked long enough, you showed your sense of humor a little bit, and they feel like they can trust you. That's really the goal of it. So don't go on too long. But that said, the more entertaining it is, the longer your leash is going to be. There's podcasts that some of the biggest podcasts in the world go for 3 hours. Now, if you are entertaining enough as a lawyer that you can go for 3 hours and keep somebody baited, you might want to switch professions. Call me. But in general, keep it pretty short and sweet. If you bring a guest on, like we'll go to a family law person. If you're bringing on a financial advisor that specifically works with divorced people, great. There's going to be a longer leash. There's going to be some information they want, and you want to get as much from that person as you can in an interview format. So if you're bringing on a guest that might have specific information, you're going to have a longer leash. And again, if it's more entertaining, if that particular subject is more entertaining, you're going to have a longer leash there as well.
Yeah. And I think to kind of go back to our comparison with podcast versus blog versus video, I think podcasting kind of allows you to get deeper into the weeds on some stuff more than maybe a blog article or a video would. To your point, it's going to be a lot more work for a lawyer to sit down and write and film like a 30-minute video explaining a topic. Oof. No one's going to want to read a blog article that is probably 10 pages long if you were to download it as a PDF. That's the stuff where you stay surface level. But like, yeah, man, a podcast, especially if you're at least somewhat engaging, somewhat entertaining, man, people can pop that in on their commute to work, 30 minutes or more, and you can get a lot of that good information out.
Absolutely. Gary Vaynerchuk is kind of the Yoda of marketing. I feel like anybody in marketing knows him. And he's been in on podcasting from day one. And one of the things he says is that podcasting does what no other medium can do, and it sells you time. Audio sells you time, because I'm not asking you to stop what you're doing. I'm not asking you to give me your undivided attention. You keep driving to work, you keep walking your dog, you keep, running on the treadmill, and you also get the information. And that is why we're seeing the audio format explode the way it is, because we're not asking you to trade any of your time for what we're offering you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the other factor then, and we kind of hit on it a little bit earlier, but I wanted to just really drive it home. To me, at least, there's a huge credibility factor about having a podcast, because at least to me, it feels like it kind of goes back to, early 2000s, the 90s and before, where people had talk shows, and it's like you have your own little talk show sort of going on. Or it's also like, kind of like I mentioned before, it's almost like an audio version of having a book. There's just that credibility factor, like, oh wow, that guy has his own podcast. It's kind of a big deal.
Absolutely. It's hip. I mean, and I tell people that when I'm talking to them about it, it's still there. I mean, I think we got a couple year window for that where it's going to be completely mainstream, but the fact that it becomes completely mainstream that's good too.
Yeah.
The fact, because everyone's going to expect it. Like right now, when they go to your website, they expect you're going to have a blog. They expect there's going to be at least a handful of posts answering some of the top questions. And it's a little weird if you don't. And I think that audio is really close to that they're like, well, why isn't there anything here I can just press play on, get a couple of my answers, feel good about it, and then make a decision. I think it's going to be odd for there not to be at least a firm like attempting it. At least somebody sounds like they sat down with their iPhone and tried to get some audio. So, but it does still have that hip factor. When you have it, it still goes, oh, that's kind of cool. And especially if it has production value. When you go to a law firm's website and there's that professional voice actor that comes on in the beginning, there's sound effects, nothing over the top, but it just has more of that NPR vibe to it. Like people took time to make sure that this was a quality product.
Yeah. And so that's a great transition now. So like, let's say an attorney wants to start a podcast. They want to take the DIY route. What does it look like to start your own podcast?
So starting is as easy as having a reasonable microphone and a computer. Step one really is that. And I say reasonable microphone, really anything better than just talking into your laptop microphone is a good start. And so you could sound almost as good as I do right this second with a $99 microphone that plugs right into your laptop. A USB microphone right into the laptop is going to sound pretty outstanding, especially compared to a lot of your competitors right now that are doing it themselves. They're, using Apple earbuds, and those microphones aren't designed to record. They're designed to communicate with, people via telephone. They're not designed to get audio. So, we frequently, especially like those of us who are a little older, I don't want to date myself, but we remember answering machines. And you would call someone or your house and leave a message. Then you would be the person who hit play and you would go, ugh, I sound like that. Well, I have great news for you. You don't sound like that. The microphone you are using is cutting so much of your voice out that it sounds awful to you when you hear it back. But when you have a good microphone like this and then you listen back to it, you're like, all right. You sound like you sound in your head because it's actually capturing the full range. So if you get a decent microphone, again, you can get a really good one for $99. And I'll tell you, like the ATR 2100X, that's the one I recommend to almost everybody. Samson Q2U, another one right around that same price range. They're USB, they plug right in, but you can grow with them. They'll work with a mixer. If you decide, oh man, this podcast is amazing, I want to do more with it, I want to bring a mixing board in here, it works for that as well. So they're great mics to grow with you. But in the beginning, you plug it right in, and you can even just go on a Zoom call and record that as your podcast. That's a really great way to start. Now, there's a lot of other levels. There's specific apps that you can use to record your podcast that way and to make the sound quality even better. But that's a really good place to start. That decent microphone is going to be the big difference maker in how you sound.
Yeah. And like full disclosure, I'm looking at my setup right here. I have the blue snowball mic, which I think, even to your point, is less than $99. I've got a fancy little windscreen here, pop filter. I got a ring light just mainly for the video. You don't really need that if you're not going to do video. And then I record straight into my computer. I use GarageBand. That's the whole setup. It's not a whole lot of extra equipment that you have to buy. To your point, you really just need the microphone.
Yep.
Do you have a recommendation on a PC program? Like if a lot of lawyers don't have a Mac computer, is there a PC program that you recommend for like recording and editing?
Sure. So Audacity is a great one. It's free open source software. Now, when it's free, you get what you pay for. So remember that. But I know I know a number of people. I go to lots of conferences with professionals, and some of them started with it way back in the day, and it's what they like, and it's what they still use. So that tells you a lot. I mean, for being free, it's still a good product. It's just if it messes up, you have no one that you can call and be angry at.
Right.
But it works really well. You can record right into it. It works on Mac and PC. So no matter where you are, you can use that. And then I'll rattle off a couple other easy ones for you. These are paid services, but they're really like kind of turnkey approaches to recording podcasts. There's Riverside.fm. Very good one, built specifically for podcasts. You can do video as well. Squadcast.fm is another one that you can use to record your podcast audio. And it's just going to be, your quality is going to be a little bit better with those services. And then to pass that, as far as like, how do you DIY this? The next thing you're going to need is a hosting service. It's where your podcast lives. And there are so many, I couldn't even name them all right now. I'll name drop my favorite one. It's the one that we use at LawPods. It's called Captivate. And I really enjoy it because it's from a team that is really connected to the podcasting world. And they have built a product that answers a lot of the problems that we have, really scratches a lot of our itches. And they stay out in front, because podcasting really started to pick up in the mid 2000s. And a number of those hosting companies from back then, their websites looked like they were built in the mid 2000s. And so, finding a podcast host that is staying updated and staying abreast and offering a lot of new and different services that help you promote your podcast. Those are things. But yeah, get that podcast host. And then once you have that host, the host is going to walk you through most of the rest of it, because they have an interest in making sure that you keep paying them. And so a lot of what they do is going to be, okay, you do this, and then you do that, and then you do that to get it all set up and distributed to Apple Podcasts, to Spotify, and all those different places. So get that microphone, get that program, Audacity or GarageBand, record it. And then once you've got it, recorded, do some editing with GarageBand or Audacity if you need to. And then you get it into that hosting service and get it set up, and you can really get it out there. I mean, there's a lot more steps obviously involved than I could say right this second. And there's a lot of other things you can do, like repurposing the content and getting the content on your website, because that's very important as well. I say, if you're not going to get the podcast on your website, I don't know that it's worth doing it. Yeah. Because that's one of the most important parts of it, is you want to get it on the website, make sure that it's there, and that you're optimizing that content, making sure it's easy for people to find and link to, and then also easy for them to leave your website if they want to and listen to it in their preferred podcast player.
Yeah. And yeah, so like, I can definitely vouch for Audacity. I've been using that for years when I had a PC. I still prefer GarageBand just because it's just nicer looking. But yeah, when it comes to hosting, I'll throw another one out there. Buzzsprout is a great platform that we use that for our podcast. They just have a really simple overlay. This is not an ad for them or anything. I definitely recommend, going out and researching all the different hosts that are out there. But yeah, the syndication process, make sure that they make it that easy for you, and to get it out on everywhere, Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon has a podcast platform now. iHeart has a podcast platform, just so many others out there. And then, yeah, to your point, definitely make sure that you get it on your website. I know these hosts, some of them, maybe all of them, do provide like an embeddable player, little embed code that you can like just create it like a blog post, and you can start putting those episodes in your blog and making it easy for people to access.
Yeah, it is that easy.
Yeah.
It's
What are
just
some other ways
code.
that people can be promoting their show?
So one of the better ways that you can promote it is with micro content, repurpose content, if you will, is take that show and pull it apart into a few different things. Is, cut out 60 seconds. Like, you said this one thing that was awesome. Like, wow, that was good. That's the pull quote, and you can cut 60 seconds of that and then overlay that on a video. You see them when you're scrolling on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and you see that little waveform moving. That lets you know this is a video. It's not a picture. And you can subtitle that, put your little 60 seconds there. And what you're doing with that is a couple of things, but you're making it easy for people to stop and give you their attention, because that's what we want. We want their attention. And when we drop a link into LinkedIn or Facebook, they're not showing it to anybody. Like the reach of a linked post that takes someone off the platform is incredibly low because they don't want you leaving the platform. So when you record your podcast, you drop a link and then crickets.
Yeah.
And so that's where this repurposed content can really help you out is you take that little 60 seconds and when they see it, they can stop for just a split second and they see the caption and then they can make the decision in that moment if this is for them. And then if it is, but the thing is, even if it's for them, you're not asking them to do anything more than just remain stopped and continue to watch. And so it keeps going. And then they go, well, that is for me. And then they might even tap it. Now they can hear it. And so they're listening to it. And then at the end of that 60 seconds, they go, I'd like to know more about that. Well, what do you know? You linked right below to the entire episode that then they can click to and land on your website and interact with that content. So you can do that with, if you're making video, your podcast, it can actually be videos of that 60-second clip. It can be audio if you want to. You can do quote images and things like that, all with the intention of capturing a little bit of their attention, overcoming that initial friction, and then giving them an opportunity to go find the entire bit of content should they choose to want to do that. So that's a great way to promote it. Another good way, we talked about this earlier, is in newsletters. Take the content, you already have it. If you have existing clients and you're making stuff that might be important for them, make sure they get it. Make sure that it goes directly to, hey, John, I thought about you today, and this is something I think that you might appreciate. And then, that's a really good way to make sure it gets out there. You can repurpose it in a lot of different ways. You can put little clippets on the front page, quick, 60-second answers to like really important client questions, and have a little playlist so they can boom, 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 and then go, oh, this podcast actually has a lot of answers to my questions. So I'll go out and, listen to full length episodes.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is one I could really rattle on for a while, but I don't want to just monologue.
Yeah, no, those are the couple of the big ones. Your social media, your emails, and your website, those are going to be probably your biggest ways to promote that. And I think this seems like as good a place as any to kind of start to land the ship here a little bit. I know I mentioned before your business is called LawPods, and you help attorneys build their podcasts and put them out there. So talk for a second about what LawPods does and how you can help people.
Sure. So the one sentence is you do the talking and LawPods does the rest. And that really is how it works. Like once we get your podcast launched, which we're going to do all the work on that as well. We're going to create your cover art. We're going to do that intro and outro. Earlier, I talked about that, having that professional voiceover. We work with 35 different professional voiceover actors and actresses that work on Toyota, Nissan, PlayStation, those kind of things. And so it's going to sound great. We're going to script that. We're going to record it. We're going to help you choose the right music that fits your brand and get that podcast launched into the world. Set up the hosting account and the RSS feed. You don't have to worry about the technical stuff. That's not something that a marketer in your firm should be wasting their time on, is figuring out how to be a podcast producer. And from there, distributing it, making sure it's everywhere you just said, that people, when they want to listen to it, that it's on their preferred podcast player. And then from there, you sit down, you do that recording, you hit stop, and then you send us the link. We're going to edit it out. We're going to pull all those ums out that we can, and the awkward pauses, and the, hey, can we break for a second? I need to do whatever. And edit that down to a point where the listener has no idea that there was ever any of that in there. It's going to be seamless for them. And then we're going to write show notes that accompany that. It's going to be about 1,400 words with all of the relevant links. If you listen to podcasts, they always say, we're going to link that in the show notes and on the blog. We're going to link that in the show notes and on the blog for you. And so everything that you've talked about is going to be sectioned out, guest information, where you can find them, how to get in touch with the firm, any relevant links that were discussed in it, and then transcribe the episode. We create micro content for you. So at the end, we're going to send you all of this information you can then immediately grab and slot right into your machine. If you're using Hootsuite, you can grab these pieces of content, put them in, throw them on an evergreen schedule. And now every new episode that comes out, you are just bam, bam, bam. You've got all of this. You start building this, evergreen library of content so it's on your website, but it's also filling your social channels. So when people go there, they're not seeing, oh, well, they published a blog post from 3 months ago, and that's like their last update. Like there's actually relevant content on those streams that they can find. And then I kind of glossed over transcription, but transcription's good as an accessibility issue. So if somebody lands on that site, they can actually get a transcript with timestamps from every, from the entire conversation. But those are also good for then coming back later and pulling out direct quotes. Finding hard-hitting things from the episode very easily to then pull out and repurpose for blog posts or newsletters or anything that you want to use amazing things. Because I know a lot of lawyers are like this as well, but I'm constantly amazed at some of the things that come out of my mouth. I don't really have an on-deck circle for ideas. They just kind of get out there. And then I listen back and I go, oh, that was really good. Yeah. We need to do something with that. So I think, most people find that out when they sit on the microphone. So that's the short answer. Imagine what the long answer sounds like.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we talk a little bit about like content multiplication. And I mean, you can literally take one podcast episode. I mean, you're familiar with Gary Vee. He talks a lot about this, but just taking that one piece of content and you can turn it into 40, 50 different pieces of content just based off of pull quotes. And you can turn those into graphics for Instagram and social media posts. You can turn into a blog post. You can make the video clips out of it. And so many possibilities that you can do with just a single podcast episode.
Sell it, man.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more?
Sure. LawPods.com. Go check that out. But if you want to get in touch with me directly, it's just robert@lawpods.com. All of our social channels are at LawPods. Thankfully, that wasn't something when we started the company that people were squatting on. So we were able to get all of them. So we're very easy to find out in the world. But even if you just had questions and want to just have a quick conversation, hit me up. I'm a natural born lawyer once upon a time. So I'm, as much as I appreciate selling, I'm not the salesman who's going to try to, sell you every time we talk. So if you have a question, legitimately feel free, just reach out. I want to hear what you have to say, because honestly, the success of your podcast is the success of the podcasting industry and my company. So, please.
Awesome. And I will link to LawPods and your email in the show notes to make it easy for everyone there. So I think that's going to do it for this week. Robert, I'll ask you our famous final question here. If you had one piece of advice for our lawyer listeners out there, what would it be?
Oh man, brand yourself. It's I learned that early on. If you're the lawyer who does everything, you're the lawyer who might as well do nothing. So figure out what your niche is, brand yourself, use your name everywhere you go. I'm Johnny Rose and I represent motel owners. That's your mantra. You get it out there, and because your name as a lawyer is who you are. If there's a podcast in your firm, be on it. Be on it as much as you can. Be the person who answers the questions, because your colleagues are going to notice that, which I think most lawyers know that that's huge, to have your colleagues notice you and be referral sources for you. But you're also going to start to develop that name outside of the legal industry. People on the street are going to know who you are because you do this thing. You represent motels. Motel owners are going to find out about you. And so, I think branding yourself is by far, this is a former lawyer speaking, so take that with the appropriate grain of salt, but definitely brand yourself. I've taken that and gone into a new field with it, because I produce 4 lawyers. Yeah. I learned that as a lawyer, that it's going to be a lot easier to be the person who works for lawyers than it is going to be the person who works for everybody. My network was already there. I knew that people would say, this guy works for lawyers specifically. He's a former lawyer. He works for lawyers. Like, that's an in right there. And I think lawyers need to capitalize on that. Like, my company grew. You couldn't convince me otherwise that my company didn't grow as fast as it did because we picked that niche, because people were able to say, they work specifically with lawyers. They know the industry. They're former lawyers, that kind of thing. So yeah, brand yourself, like, be out there, make sure people know who you are, say your name a lot.
Yes. Could not agree more. That's a lot of our message here at Spotlight Branding. Well, that is going to do it for us this week. Continue to rate, review us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere else that you are consuming the show. I know we're all over the place. Really do appreciate all the feedback that we continue to get. If you anything else you want to hear us cover, I can go find somebody and we can go talk about it and get that information for you. That's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Robert, thank you for taking some time for us this week.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.